What is the anchoring cognitive bias? The anchoring effect is a cognitive bias in which a single reference point or anchor influences a person's decisions. Following the setting of the anchor value, an individual's future arguments, estimates, and so on may differ from what they would have been without the anchor. If an automobile is put next to a more expensive model, for example, an individual may be more likely to buy it. The anchor, lower than the anchor prices suggested in talks, may appear acceptable, even cheap to the buyer, even though they are still significantly higher than the car's true market value. When estimating the orbit of Mars, for example, one can start with the Earth's orbit, 365 days, and adjust upward until they get a value that appears fair, usually less than 687 days, the correct answer. Psychophysics was the source of the earliest description of the anchoring effect. It was discovered that while judging stimuli along a continuum, the first and last stimuli were used to compare the other stimuli. This is also referred to as end anchoring. Sharif et al. Extended this to attitudes in their 1958 paper, Assimilation and Effects of Anchoring Stimuli on Judgments. Experimental findings. Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman were the first to propose the anchoring and adjustment heuristic. In one of their early investigations, participants were required to compute the product of the integers 1 through 8 in less than 5 seconds, either as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 or reversed as 8 7 6 5 4 3 2 1. Participants had to make an estimate after their first few multiplications because they didn't have enough time to calculate the entire result. Because the sequence began with tiny numbers, the median estimate for these first multiplications was 512. When the sequence began with larger numbers, the median estimate was 2,250. 40,320 is the right answer. Participants in another Tversky and Kahneman study watched a roulette wheel that was pre-programmed to stop on either 10 or 65. The participants were then asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. Participants whose wheel came to a halt at 10 guessed lower numbers, by 25% on average, than those whose wheel came to a halt at 65. 45% on average. In previous trials, the pattern has held true for a wide range of estimating subjects. In a research by Dan Ariely, for example, participants were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number and ponder whether they would spend that amount for products whose value they did not know, such as wine, chocolate, or computer equipment. They were subsequently invited to bid on these things, and those with higher 2-digit numbers submitted offers that were 60% to 120% greater than those with lower social security numbers, which had become their anchor. Many people replied yes when asked if they thought the number was indicative of the item's value. To avoid this ambiguity, a small number of researchers failed to replicate anchoring effects using approaches that were clearly random, such as the Excel random generator button and die roll. The anchoring effect was also discovered in a study of property prices published in the Journal of Real Estate Research. The 2-year and 9-year highs on the Case-Shiller House Price Index were found to be useful as anchors in predicting current house values in this study. The findings were used to suggest that these 2-year and 9-year highs could be useful in projecting housing prices. Difficulty of avoiding. Anchoring is difficult to avoid, according to many research. In one study, pupils were given anchors that were incorrect. They were asked if Mahatma Gandhi died before or after the age of 9, and whether he died before or after the age of 140. Obviously, neither of these anchors can be true, yet when the two groups were asked to guess when he died, they came up with dramatically different estimates, average age of 50 versus average age of 67. Other research have taken a more direct approach to removing anchoring. Participants in a study looking at the causes and properties of anchoring were given an anchor and asked to identify how many doctors were listed in the local phone book. They were also told that anchoring would contaminate their responses and that they should do whatever they could to avoid it. A a control group was given neither an anchor nor an explanation. All of the experimental groups reported greater estimations than the control group, regardless of how and if they were told appropriately. Participants were unable to prevent the anchoring effect while being explicitly aware of it. People are unable to properly adjust from an anchor, even when monetary incentives are supplied, according to a later study. Durability of anchoring. Given the availability of knowledge about the objective, anchoring effects are also shown to be sufficiently present. This implies that, despite a delay in judgment toward a target, the magnitude of anchoring effects has been observed to be unaffected throughout time. 3 tests were carried out to see how long anchoring effects could last. Despite introducing a 1-week delay for half of the sample population in each experiment, similar results of immediate and delayed target judgment were obtained. Even with commonly encountered targets, temperature, used in one of the experiments concluded that external information experienced during the delayed judgment period has little influence relative to self-generated anchors, indicating that anchoring effects may precede priming in duration, especially when the anchoring effects were formed during the task. Further research to determine whether or not an effect can be properly maintained over a long length of time has found inconclusive. Anchoring bias in groups. Given the old adage that 2 heads are better than 1, it's common to assume that groups make more objective decisions than individuals. This premise, however, is backed up by a variety of studies that have yet to reach an agreement. Despite the fact that certain groups do better than individuals, they are discovered to be equally as biased as or even more biased than their individual counterparts. The discriminating manner in which information is communicated, processed, and aggregated based on each individual's anchoring knowledge and belief could be one explanation. As a result, the decision-making process is of lower quality, which intensifies the pre-existing entrenched biases. The reason for group anchoring is unknown. Group anchors may have been developed at the group level or may simply be the result of the personal anchors of multiple individuals. Individual members consolidated their respective anchors to reach a choice in the direction of the anchor put in previous experiments when provided an anchor before the trial. However, there is a distinction to be made between individual and group-based anchor biases, with groups tending to overlook or dismiss external information due to their trust in the collective decision-making process. According to the competing anchor theory, the presence of pre-anchor preferences also hamper the extent to which external anchors influence the group decision, since groups tend to give more weight to self-generated anchors. A number of tests were carried out to look at group anchoring bias and possible solutions to avoid or lessen it. The first experiment proved that anchors indeed influence groups, but the other 2 trials demonstrated how to avoid group anchoring bias. To lessen the power of anchoring inside groups, strategies such as process accountability and motivation through competition rather than cooperation have been used. Business intelligence. The influence of business intelligence, by systems on the anchoring effect was investigated in a peer-reviewed study. Business intelligence refers to a set of tools and services that companies utilize to gain important insights about their performance. The underlying question in this study was whether or not using these technologies can reduce cognitive bias. The outcome of the decision-making process was the dependent variable, whereas the use of the bias system was the independent variable. In a predicting decision, the subjects were given a plausible anchor and a spurious anchor. The bias system was found to attenuate the negative impacts of the spurious anchor but had no effect on the plausible anchor's effects. This is significant in the business world because it demonstrates that humans are still vulnerable to cognitive biases, even when employing sophisticated technology tools. One of the experimenters' subsequent recommendations was to include a warning about the anchoring effect in bias systems. There have been several hypotheses proposed to explain what causes anchoring, and while some are more popular than others, there is no consensus on which is the best. Two authors defined anchoring as easy to demonstrate but difficult to explain in a study on possible reasons of anchoring. At least one group of researchers has proposed that there are numerous reasons at work, and that what is referred to as anchoring is actually a collection of effects. Anchoring and adjusting. Tversky and Kahneman proposed a theory known as anchoring as adjustment in their original study. People adapt away from an anchor to get to their final answer. According to this idea, however, they adjust inadequately, resulting in their final guess being closer to the anchor than it would be otherwise. Other researchers discovered data to back up the anchoring and adjusting theory. Anchoring effects are exacerbated by factors that affect judgmental correction capacity, such as intoxication and executing a strenuous cognitive load, rehearsing a long string of digits and working memory. Incentivizing accuracy also appears to diminish anchoring effects when people know which way they should adjust. There are some flaws with this model. Alternative theory proponents have critiqued this concept, stating that it is only applicable when the initial anchor is beyond the allowed range of solutions. To use an earlier example, because Mahatma Gandhi did not die at the age of 9, people will adjust accordingly. There would be no adjustment if a fair number was submitted. As a result, critics argue that this theory cannot account for all examples of anchoring effect. Selective accessibility. A notion known as confirmatory hypothesis testing provides an alternative explanation for selective accessibility. In a nutshell, selective accessibility posits that when provided an anchor, a judge, i.e., someone who makes a decision, will assess whether the anchor is a good answer. Assuming it isn't, the judge moves on to another guess, but not before looking at all of the anchor's relevant features. The judge then looks for ways in which the new answer is comparable to the anchor while evaluating it, resulting in the anchoring effect. This idea has received empirical support in a number of investigations. Attitude change. Regarding attitude change, a third explanation of anchoring has recently been presented. According to this idea, supplying an anchor causes people's views to evolve in favor of the anchor's specific favor, biasing subsequent responses to have similar traits to the anchor. Leading proponents of this theory believe it is a viable alternative explanation that is consistent with previous findings on anchoring and adapting, as well as selective accessibility. Influencing factors. A slew of studies have connected sad or depressed moods to a more thorough and accurate assessment of problems. As a result, previous research suggested that persons in depressive moods would employ anchoring less frequently than those in better moods. Recent research, on the other hand, has found that sad people are more prone to employ anchoring than cheerful or neutral persons. Experience. Experts, those having a lot of knowledge, experience, or expertise in a particular sector, were found to be more resistant to the anchoring effect in early studies. Numerous studies since then have shown that, while expertise can sometimes mitigate the effect, even specialists are subject to anchoring. Researchers discovered that even experienced legal experts were affected by anchoring in a study on the effects of anchoring on court decisions. Even when the anchors provided were arbitrary and unrelated to the instance and issue, this remained true. This also applies to goal setting, where more experienced people develop objectives based on their previous experiences, which has an impact on negotiation outcomes. Personality. Most of the Big Five personality traits have been linked to anchoring vulnerability in studies. Anchoring is more likely to affect people who are pleasant and conscientious, whereas those who are extroverted are less likely to be affected. According to another study, people who are receptive to new experiences are more susceptible to the anchoring effect. Cognitive ability. It's debatable whether cognitive ability has an impact on anchoring. Anchoring dropped, but did not eliminate, in people with stronger cognitive capacity, according to a recent study on willingness to pay for consumer products. However, another study discovered that cognitive ability had no bearing on how likely people were to employ anchoring. Overconfidence. Other elements, such as personal cognitive qualities such as knowledge and decision-making skill, contribute to cognitive conceit or overconfidence, reducing the likelihood of seeking other sources of confirmation. This component has also been linked to tasks that are more challenging. Even subject area specialists are susceptible to overconfidence and should actively reduce such behavior. Following a study of estimations under uncertain conditions, Tversky and Kahneman, 1971, proposed that individuals actively build anchors to assist and to reduce overconfidence in their predictions, despite various attempts to restrict overconfidence proving futile. Anchoring in negotiations. Anchoring is used in the negotiating process to provide an agreed-upon starting point for subsequent conversations. The subjective anchor is set as soon as one side makes their first price offer. The second anchor is the counter anchor. In addition to Tversky and Kahneman's original research, numerous subsequent investigations have revealed that anchoring has a significant impact on an object's evaluated value. For example, despite the fact that negotiators can evaluate an offer based on a variety of factors, research has shown that they tend to focus on only one. A chosen beginning point can have a significant impact on the variety of prospective counteroffers in this way. The offer and counteroffer process leads to a mutually advantageous agreement. Multiple studies, however, have found that early offers have a greater impact on the outcome of talks than later counteroffers. During the strategic negotiation process workshops, an example of the power of anchoring was demonstrated. A group of participants is separated into two halves during the workshop, buyers and vendors. Before entering a one-on-one negotiation, each side obtains identical information about the other party. Both parties debrief their experiences following this exercise. The findings demonstrate that the location of the participants' negotiation anchor had a substantial impact on their success. Anchoring has an impact on everyone, including experts in their fields. Northcraft and Neal conducted a study to determine the discrepancy between students and real estate agents' estimates of a house's value. Both groups were shown a house and given various listing prices in this experiment. Each group was then asked to discuss what variables influenced their decisions after they had made their offer. The real estate agents denied being impacted by the original price in follow-up interviews, but the results showed that both groups were equally motivated by that anchor. Anchoring can also have a more subtle impact on discussions. Unishevsky and we looked at the consequences of anchor precision. Participants were given an initial price for a beach property and then were asked to give their opinion on how much it was worth. They were given a general, seemingly non-specific anchor, for example, $800,000, or a more detailed and particular anchor, for example, $799,800. Participants who were given a general anchor made more adjustments to their estimates than those who were given a precise anchor, $751,867 versus $784,671. This effect, according to the authors, is due to a scale difference. In other words, the anchor influences not just the initial value, but also the starting scale. People adapt in large increments, $19, $21, etc., when given a generic anchor of $20, but on a smaller scale, $19.75, $19.95, etc., when given a more particular anchor like $19.85. As a result, a more precise initial price is more likely to result in a final price that is closer to the initial price. When it comes to deciding whether to place the first or second anchor, the party who sets the second anchor has the advantage because the counter anchor establishes the position in the middle of both anchors. Due to a potential lack of information, the person who sets the first anchor may set it too low, which is counter to their own interests. In general, negotiators who set the first anchor are less satisfied with the outcome of the negotiation than those who set the counter anchor. This could be due to remorse or a perception that the negotiation's full potential was not realized or maximized. However, studies show that negotiators who make the first offer are more likely to reach economically favorable outcomes. In our channel, we will explore as many types of cognitive biases that are possible to gain a better understanding of how our brains sometimes trick themselves. Subscribe to our channel, click on the notification icon and watch our videos as soon as we release them. Like this video and share with your friends to impress them with your knowledge.